A very good evening to all of our audience in Guyana and around the world as we come to you here from New York and from Guyana on Globespan 24x7. I know generally we are on Monday, but for the last 2 Mondays, there were some problems with Facebook, and then there were some technical issues last Monday. But today we are on, and most likely next Monday we'll be back on as normal. So we want to welcome all our viewers on Facebook and on YouTube here in the United States, around the world, and in Guyana to our program tonight. We want to thank Nohar Singh for making this platform available, and of course, Devian Bisu, our technical specialist. Today, we are talking about the leadership of the People's National Congress. As you all know, in a few weeks, I believe, they will have the Congress and they will be electing a new lead of the party. And one of the contestants for that position we have in our program tonight, and we'd like to hear from you so we can ask Dr. Charles exactly what his plans are for the party. But before we get into that, we will want to welcome you, Dr. Charles, to our program tonight.
Thank you very much, Charles. Good to be here.
All right. And of course, my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome all to the program.
Okay. Dr. Van West, when you left government, you proceeded to, you migrated overseas. Can you tell us what transpired when you, because at one time you were a minister, and then after you're not a minister anymore, I think you migrated, and then you returned to Guyana. Can you fill that gap in what transpired during that period?
Well, I actually didn't migrate because I was recruited to join the specialized agency of the United Nations, which is the World Health Organization. And I joined the regional office in the Americas, which is PAHO. As you know, PAHO existed long before WHO. And so I, as an international civil servant, I remained connected over the years as I worked in a variety of countries, looking at health development and other aspects of development.
Oh, okay. So for those of our young audience who don't know Dr. Van West Charles, he is the son-in-law of the former president, the late President Forbes Burnham, and he was also Minister of Health. And Dr. Charles, did you do other ministry as well?
Yes, Charles, while I was Minister of Health, I held a number of other portfolios: health, water, environment, and housing. And then after President Burnham died, I then had the portfolio of medical education, food policy, and the environment. I also was responsible for as the chair of the Civil Defense Commission while I held these portfolios, and headed a number, about 2 or 3 bilateral commissions for the government.
So in your deliberation in the political realm, arena, which area did you feel most, I know you're a medical doctor, but in terms of your in charge of the different ministries and different areas, which area gives you the most joy in executing for the people of Guyana?
Well, I think what is very interesting is that the health is such an important issue, but the connectedness, the intersectorial connectedness, also leads towards the health development, which leads to national development. Because at the end of the day, without human capital, development cannot occur. Without a healthy workforce, development cannot occur. So all of these other areas dovetailed to look at the issues of human capital and development. So that is why when we look at health, we speak to the issue of health determinants for development. Housing is linked to it, water and sanitation. And in those periods, let me say to you, while I had health, I was also overseeing GAIWA at that time, it's now GWI, because water and sanitation are also directly linked to health. So it's an integrated approach to development where health is seen as a critical aspect. I also led the program, the team that really established the medical school at the University of Guyana.
So it was, oh, that's very interesting. So under your stewardship as Minister of Health, the medical school started at UG? That's
right.
Ah, that's an incredible feat.
Yes. I mean, we had a different approach to the curriculum when it started. And on the curriculum committee, we had Dr. Luncheon worked with us, Dr. Derry Harry, people from funded by PAHO WHO, Cosmo Ordonez from Cuba, and some other people out of Mexico and Canada who worked on the curriculum because it was a problem-based curriculum. So when the student actually would commence medicine, and it took a variety of different disciplines into the program. We had pharmacists, public health nurses, youngsters who completed their advanced levels. So it was a good mix when the program started.
And Dr. Charles, I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Roger Luncheon and so on. And it just triggered off to me, you were Minister of Health when President Burnham died, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
Right. Do you want to give us, because you're giving so much conflicting report, he died since 1985, God rest his soul. But what really transpired? Because we were told that he went in for a simple throat operation, if I'm correct. And something went wrong, apparently. Would you want us to educate us a little more that we might not know?
Well, all I would say to you is this, that every surgical procedure has a risk. And he had issues with his cardiovascular system. Remember, he had a heart attack prior to going in some years before. And he arrested while on the table going through the procedure. So it's unfortunate. It's a sad moment for us as a family. And but it just tells you that every surgical procedure has a risk, no matter how small. And this is the issues. These are some of the issues that we have to deal with in health. As you know, you see COVID. There are adverse effects to the vaccinations, and every vaccination has an adverse effect. So we have to understand as we go forward to improve the science as much as possible. We try to reduce the risks to ensure that people survive.
What is interesting, you mentioned that there, that President Burnham and President Cherry Jagan were pals in the younger days. And I didn't know that President Burnham had a heart attack, but President Jagan died because of a heart attack. So it seems that the two friends, they went there to the spirit world, maybe on the same path. I'm not sure.
Well, what we can say at least about the two comrades, they devoted their lives. They have differences, and they devoted their lives to the development of the country. And there were many stresses during that period, during the Cold War, that they both indulged in. We just came through the 6th of October. The 6th of October is when we had the suspension of the Constitution, the Cubana air disaster. There are many things that will bring a lot of stresses to the political life. And I would say to you, as a young country, those two leaders obviously had a lot of stresses to deal with.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. Dr. Rose?
Yes, Dr. Charles, I first want to ask you, You're seeking the leadership of the PNC party, not APNU per se. Now, can you tell our listeners what plans you have for the party should you want the leadership?
Sure. My view and vision is that of focused on development of the country, development of the regions, development of the communities. And I see a nexus between the political structure that you have on the ground and the development at varying levels. So a group which I see as very, very critical has to be a hub for developmental activities at the level of the community. So the group has to be concerned about the profile of the different people within that community, whether they are farmers, whether they are healthcare workers. The group has to be concerned about the performance of the school system within its geographical space. It has to be concerned about the security system in its geographical space and show the leadership for the community within that space. So it is, and the reorganization of the Secretariat is one that will support this development at different levels. Also, when you come to the regional democratic councils, it really requires, right, the support to ensure that development is taking place and based on principles of equity and distributive equity and justice. So it is a reorganization and which allows you also that the groups at that level and the regional committees will ensure that there is a coming together of the principles, the partnerships, building partnerships. The partnership, APNU, for example, is not something that exists at the center, but it is the whole concept of partnerships has to permeate throughout the organization. And then there are a series of subcommittees that the party has to look at in labor, oil and gas, the socioeconomic sector, business, technology, infrastructure. So it has to be a party that can respond whether it is in government or not. And that is the reorganization that I bring to the table because of my experience over more than 30 years in terms of building organizations and managing organizations, that and research becomes a critical component in terms of how we share knowledge and build. Now, when we look at our population distribution, we see a lot of young people. So the party has to be so organized with a vision to be able to reach out and support the development of young people and create opportunities for young people, and also to be representative of people's issues. There has to be a link between the overall political strategy and the parliamentary work that has to go on in terms of ensuring that our people meaning the Guyanese population, will have access at all levels. Because once you are elected, you are not elected to represent a specific section of the population. You're elected to represent the entire population.
Let me ask you this question. Right now, there are two leadership. One is for APNU, parliamentary leader, Mr. Joe Armand, and there's a leader for the PNCR. Presently is former President David Granger. But right now, Walter Lawrence is acting because Mr. Granger has taken indefinite leave. My question to you is this. Should you win the leadership, would you allow two leaders of the opposition, one for APNU and one for the PNCR?
No, there is one, the leader of the PNCR is the overall leader in terms of the political direction where we go. But because you're in a partnership, you've got to ensure that the other members of the partnership are on board, and how that functions and how that is managed will ensure that the leader of the PNCR plays his or her role in terms of how the partnership is managed and eventually how the coalition is managed. But we must consider and understand that the PNCR is the critical hub, the main hub. It's organized across the country more than any of the other members of the partnership or the coalition. So it has to play a very critical role in terms of the performance of the opposition at this point in time, or even in terms of the government when it takes the government.
Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thanks. Currently, and this is in the public domain, the party is divided. It has factions. How would you unite the party and get it ready for the 2025 election, should you win the leadership?
Well, look, one of the things that we have to ensure is tolerance for difference in people's views and people's opinions. And I think that is very critical. The other thing is the adherence to the constitution of the party. Once we can do those things and permit the expression of difference, a discussion on the different issues, I think we can proceed. Because in the main, the mission of everyone in the party is to ensure that we show the leadership that will improve the quality of life of every citizen in the country. Therefore, when you manage the coalition and when you provide information and you manage the party, you provide information to people, and people are consulted and they are given the opportunity to state their case and have a discussion on the case, then I do not see an issue at all with respect to disunity and factions and so forth. Yes, there has to be the opportunity. And let me say one of the other things is that I believe that we should move to. The identification of people to represent the party at all levels has to be through a process of primaries, whereby people are not selected by people who are in powerful positions within the party, that there is a process of primaries where people can contest, and people, especially if you want to be, for example, a councillor of the Regional Democratic Councillor, if you want to be in the parliament, you must be able to state your case. You must be able to debate and permit a process, a democratic process, where people can vote. That is the important thing, to ensure that democracy works in detail. Because when you look at our constitution, it is really grounded in democracy. It is like everything else. It's how we ensure that the practices are adhered to at all of the time.
Dr. Van West Charles, the leaders of the PNCR/APNU do not recognize this government as being a legal government after almost a year and a half in office, because they claim that the PP rigged the election and won it, and they will not recognize this government. Do you recognize this government personally? And what would you tell the other leaders if it's the right thing they're doing not to recognize this government, or to recognize this government and let's move on to unite and divide and move on and unite and develop the country?
Well, let me say to you that I have my concerns about the results of the elections. And that is why there are petitions. Having said that, the courts have made a decision. Now, having made a decision, a political decision to enter Parliament, this is my personal view I'm giving you.
Okay.
Having made a political decision to enter the Parliament, I think it is incumbent on all of the parliamentarians, and it is incumbent on the executive branch to ensure that the government functions and that they function in the interest of the people of Guyana. Now, so having gone into and accepted, for me, they gone in and accepted the position as the opposition. I think also the government, also the president and the cabinet needs to recognize also that they have to work together in the interests of people, and that the issue of being installed, that for me can be handled or should be handled by the PNC and the political aspects of APNU and the coalition. But I do not believe that the work of the government and the interests of the people should be placed in a position in which we are not permitting a discussion and looking at the allocation of resources in a real manner because of a word, installed. So I believe that we have to deal with the issue of the results of the election politically and through the courts. They legally and politically. But we must not permit government workings to be stymied, because we have to discuss how these resources are going to be distributed. I am not happy, for example, with how the flood relief has gone. I am not happy with how the distribution of the $250,000 to sugar workers by itself and neglect the public servants and other people. I am not happy with how the terminations of people from GWI and other sectors of the public service have gone, and there is a seemingly bias, ethnic bias to these terminations. But you have to be at the table to discuss these issues. And let me say to you that I believe that this is the worst in our history, when at least the two major parties are unable to talk. Because, and I think all of the political actors should be able to discuss some of these critical issues. Because at the end of the day, it is not about the power of who are representing us in Parliament. It is about what happens to our people. And therefore, these issues have got to be discussed. Formally, for the distribution of the agricultural flood relief grants. I mean, you hear Dr. Ramaya and other people in Berbice of people who never had farms have been given grants of millions of dollars. That those things smack of misallocations, corruptions, etc. But we must be at the table to discuss these issues in a real way, in a strong way, so that we can be able to ensure that the citizens of the country can benefit from the resources of government.
So what advice would you give to the present leaders who are still clamoring, saying that this government is not recognized and it's illegal?
My view is we have to get to the table and we have to discuss these issues clearly, and it's about time. It's too long now. Let us discuss the issues. Let us find the modus operandi on both sides, the president and the leader of the opposition. And I think politically, the missing aspect of this is the political action from the political parties. Because at the end of the day, it is not when we go to the people, it's not the parliamentarians by themselves, it's the political parties that go to the people. And therefore, the political parties have got to resolve this matter very quickly and let us move on. You still pursue the actions in the court, and you still take your political actions out in the public domain with respect to whether you agree or not that they're installed, and that is a political action. But government has to work.
I would like to turn to a question that might not be appeasing to you and others, but it's age. In Guyana, 66% of the population are under 40 years of age. Both you and Mr. Aubrey Norton are the only two declared candidates. And by 2025, if my arithmetic is correct, both of you will be in your 70s. How would you address the youth issue? And how will you expect the youth to see or support you when you are 2.5 times their ages?
Well, the age is not you live in North America, and you know in all of government services and even the private sector that age is not a determining factor. Race or gender or ethnicity should be a determining factor. But you cannot run the system by youth alone. You require experience. You look at your Congress in the United States, and you look at the Senate, and you look at what the average age, you look at other countries. So,
folks, we're having some technical problems. Just bear with us. It should be resolved momentarily.
You're not hearing me?
No, we're hearing you. You could go ahead.
You're hearing me?
Yes, Dr. Rose got disconnected, but you can continue.
Oh, but he asked the question.
That's okay. He'll come back on.
Go ahead, Dr. Charles.
Right. So, you live in the United States, and you look at your Congress, and you look at your Senate, you look at Great Britain, and different other jurisdictions. It's a combination of youth and experience. And running governments and running political organizations is not a simple matter. It comes to the issue, it has to come to the issue with experience. And you have to be able, as the experienced citizen, to be able to transfer your knowledge so that you can sustain your progress as you move off. So the whole issue, when you look at what drives development today in Europe in particular, it's the use of knowledge and the transfer of knowledge. When you look at the role of the diaspora and development, it's knowledge and the transfer of knowledge. The issue of age, gender, ethnicity, all of these things are not factors. And if they were factors, the constitution of the party would have clearly stated. It doesn't state anything like that. It's only the issue of if you have any mental incapacity. But that is not prevalent, at least not on my side. My brain is ticking, and I'm up very early in the day, and I read every day different journals and so forth. And so you need experience in different fields, and you bring young people, especially young people who are from a professional standpoint, right, who are bringing other attributes to the table so that we find more cohesive solutions to the problem. The world, this is a technological world. Some of the experienced folks are not on the cutting edge of technology. And that's where bringing young people into the decision-making table, at the table, is critical. Listening to their voice, equal participation.
Again, folks, we're having some problems with the network.
No, Doc, we're hearing him. Go ahead, Dr. Charles.
equal participation with youth experience in finding solutions to the problems of the country is, I think, the determining strategy that we should embrace.
All right, Dr. Charles, I know Dr. Rose got a problem there. You mentioned you have some issues with the elections. What might be some issues that you're talking about?
Well, when you look at, first of all, and which has to be addressed, is a bloated list. But when you look at, in petition 99, the issue relates to the boxes where statutory documents were missing. That in itself points to a problem of contamination. And you have to be able to vouch and ensure that the purity of these boxes. And these are statutory documents which are prescribed by law. So once they are missing, it has to be a red flag in terms of the veracity, the validity of what is in the box. So those are some of the things. Plus, there are examples where people voted who were not in the country. There are people who were died and who voted. So there are a myriad of issues which emerge, and those are real issues. But let me say to you that the list is a serious problem. And I do not believe that in terms of taking us forward or moving us forward, that the GCOM and the government and the political actors should proceed without a very clean list. Whilst the court may have ruled that people cannot, if we want to ensure that people who are living overseas and on the list and vote, let us discuss that. That is not a problem for me. But the list has got to be cleaned. It has got to be cleansed. And therefore, I don't see us moving forward if we go to another elections with a list that is bloated.
But Dr. Charles, just let me jump in here and say something. Dr. Charles, if you're telling us that they were missing paperwork in those ballot boxes, that is a problem for GCOM. GCOM should have charged those returning officers and let them tell the world where those papers went, those documents went. So for that, you cannot disqualify the voters who took the time to vote out there. That is a problem for GCOM. If GCOM had gone to the court to charge those people, they would have found those papers.
But there must be a reason why by law it is stipulated that these statutory documents should be in the ballot boxes. It couldn't be a willy-nilly position taken that these statutory documents should be in there and they're not in there. It's in the law. And therefore, it raises a question of validity. And therefore, that's a major problem. Because constitutionally, when it comes to results, it speaks to the issue of valid votes. So that is the issue. So whether I don't disagree with you that GCOM has to do what it has to do, but politically in terms of the results, those are things that I don't think that we can accept as being legal when they are prescribed by the law. We have to adhere to the law.
But Dr. Charles, you know also that there are only a selected boxes on the East Coast that Mr. Mingo was in charge of that these shenanigans took place. And as Dr. Rose rightly mentioned,
no, I think in Region 1 also.
Well, very few, if any, but
you see,
on the East Coast.
It's not in 4, it is in 1 and other areas. So you can't dismiss it and focus on Mingo or Region 4, and knowing that there's the same practice that occurred in Region 1 and other jurisdictions.
Okay, but Dr. Charles, and another question is that do you think that the coalition was trying to rig the election?
No, why would you want to rig it? I mean, the issues in front of you was very, very clear. When you look at some of the issues that emerged in what is called the recount, and there are issues with that. People who voted were actually dead, and people were not in the country who actually voted. I mean, those are issues of serious concern, because it comes down to the, and GCOM has a lot of work to do, I would say, in terms of the management of the elections, because how can you permit people to vote who would have died? So it comes down to the overall management, and this is where I agree with Dr. Rose, that GCOM has a lot of work in terms of looking at ensuring that the processes are met.
But what the some of the results we are seeing, Dr. Charles, and you're running for the leadership of the PNC. If you win the leadership, as Dr. Rose said, you'll be looking for votes from all Guyanese.
Exactly.
But if you're not prepared to call a spade, half of the Guyanese will say, you know, you're just like the PNC, you're going to rig election, and that's the stain that the PNC has left Guyana with. I mean, whether we want to agree or not, that there was rigged election and they were attempt to rig the one in 2020. Now, I'm not saying the court still have to determine the petition, but from all indications, where are the SOPs from the PNC to show that they won the election in 2020 and they do not want to accept that the PEP won the election?
Charles, now, the determinant, the PNCR or the coalition has a right to file its petitions, and they have filed them. One, because of an administrative error, it was thrown out. That is appeal. The PNC may have its SOPs, but they haven't got a locus standi to declare who are the winners. GCOM has, so the SOPs that have got to be produced are the SOPs of, first of all, by GCOM. If there are discrepancies with the ones produced by GCOM, then the lawyers of the PNCR would then produce their SOPs in the court. But I don't think that it is wise for you to label, and I respect you, for you to label the PNC as riggers, and because the fact that we called certain things out, and our resolve is to move to the courts. That is where we are at the moment. Now, once the courts make a decision, and I think people need to understand the judicial system. You have at one level, a decision is made, you're not happy with it, it is your right to move to another level. You move from the High Court to the Appeal Court, and now we have the Caribbean Court of Justice. So I think we need to be calm and let the issues be resolved in the courts. I agree with Dr. Rose. Government has to work in the interests of our people, and the parties politically can call what you want to call, but I want to state very clearly, I believe in truth. I adhere to truth, and I want to ensure that any system I'm involved in is clean. So we look to, for me, as a leader of the PNCR, I would be looking with a keen eye and looking at the processes and ensuring that all of the processes throughout the country are going to be met. But that is why I'm calling and saying to you, for us to get out of this morass, we need to have a clean list. I don't think any right-thinking person who understands the importance for us as a society with what is coming to us from oil, that we need to be caught up in a problem, an electoral problem that keeps going on and on. Let us have a clean list and let us define, look at what aspects of the reform, if there is need for reform, that has to be addressed. And I think we can move forward based on majority position.
Okay, Charles, we'll take a short commercial break now. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion. So viewers, stay right there. We'll be back shortly.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our Travelspan and Amros Travels customers and staff. We are still operating after COVID shutdown thanks to all of your support. Our staff has made the best efforts during COVID to speak with the airlines on your behalf. They stayed on hold for hours sometimes with the airlines to rebook your reservations. We are happy to serve. Our offices are operating at 10809 Liberty Avenue, Richmond Hill, New York, and our Val Park office and GT offices are open as well. Travelspan survived these 27 years with our customers, staff support, and God. In our 27 years, we are grateful to be here with you in the community. So call us today in New York at 718-845-0437. In Trinidad, call 645-1604. And in Georgetown, call 227-1701. And Rose Hall, call 337-4287. Folks, the Nest Restaurant is the place to dine for Guyanese and Caribbean dishes. It is the best restaurant in Queens. The staff is courteous, and Dave, the owner, is always there to welcome you. So for a memorable dining experience, visit the Nest Restaurant located at 12717 101 Avenue, South Richmond Hill. Go and make a reservation today or takeout. Call 718-847-4035. Get your meals delivered directly to your home. Order your curry duck curry, goat, or chicken, plus your dalpuri roti and bus-up shut from allfromonesupplier.com. We ship your meals directly to your home, so you can enjoy it upon arrival or refrigerate it and take it out when you're ready to eat. No more waiting in lines and no more losing time. Now you can treat yourself with a tasty curry and roti. You could also order solos, ices, pear jacks, coconut water, and much more from allfromonesupplier.com. It is free shipping to all U.S. states on all your curry duck curry, goat, and chicken, plus sodas and all West Indian items. So treat yourself or send a gift box of your favorite food, tasty pastries, sweets, and coconut water, or any West Indian item, products such as fish, meat, curry powders, pepper sauces, and much more from allfromonesupplier.com. Call today at 718-551-3292 or visit allfromonesupplier.com. Remember, it's free shipping throughout the U.S. Globespan 24x7.
Welcome back to our audience as we discuss the leadership of the PNC. A candidate who will be contesting for that position And should he win that contest, he will become the leader of the opposition. And of course,
no, the leader of the party.
Leader of the party, which in turn will also be hopefully leader of the opposition, and then we'll make decision in what he's saying tonight. Dr. Charles, you know, you had mentioned, and I just want to recap quickly before we move on to another topic. I don't know if you listened to the former CEO when Dr. Serge Bali was the chairman of GCOM. They had a press conference, and he said very clearly that it is almost impossible for anyone to vote for someone who they pretend to be, they're not that person. And he was very clear that the GCOM's manuscript says that if I come and say I am Van West Charles, they say, okay, what is the name of your mother? And your mother's name is, and then I have to answer that. And my date of birth is, and I have to answer that. And whatever the question was, that is in the GCOM manuscript. So when they say, when they're now making allegations, and a lot of those allegations were proven false, that people who died voted or people overseas voted and so on, there seems to be no substantial proof of that. But no, yet he seems to hold on to that allegation of you know, all these people voting who are not there. When the CEO himself, Mr. Lowenfield, said it is impossible for anyone to do that.
No, I don't agree. Academically, you can say that. In practice, no. In certain jurisdictions, different things happen. When agents are not present, representing political parties, different things happen. And we have to have a different oversight in terms of how the voting process goes. I would say to you that I am not convinced that what we see on paper is what occurs in practice. And I'm sure if the PPP wants to be truthful, they will say that, because in certain areas, you haven't got the reach of representation at sometimes in some villages and so forth. And therefore, you may want to say, look, this person who is on the list, and people know that the person is dead. But there has to be a way whereby we can, once people die, it is timely that those persons are removed from the list. And in the age of computerization, that is not difficult. It is not difficult if GCOM, if there's a will, it can happen. And to say that you cannot remove these people who are dead from the list, you've got to, there's a nexus between the GRO, which should be computerized, and the sharing of the files with GCOM, the people who are dead. They are issuing the death certificates. In the indigenous populations, the Tushals in the villages, they have a register of the people who are dead. That level of computerization and the collection of that data enables us to be conducting a process that is timely and cleaning the list as we proceed. But if we have a system in which there is no intention of cleaning that list throughout and wait until there's an attempt at the time of elections for claims and objection periods and so forth, that is not a healthy process. With the level of computerization that appears to us.
I got you, Dr. Charles. If you become the leader of the opposition in the new election,
the PNCR,
of the PNC, would you, as leader of opposition, meet with President Ali and sit down and work with him a strategy to get Guyana on a path that all can benefit, as the president is saying he wants one Guyana, Guyana for all? Would you be willing to do that?
It will be incumbent on the leader of the PNCR to meet, because this is about the business of the country. It is about people's lives. And if I am elected as leader of the PNCR, why would I not move forward to meet and have a serious discussion of some of the issues that are affecting the way that I perceive the country is going, and have a serious discussion on it? Of course I will. I think it's incumbent on every political leader to be speaking with the president about the issues that we see, because you have the issue in the parliament, but the leaders, the political leaders, must be able to speak and deal with the issues. It cannot be left at a bureaucratic level. The political, and you know, I want to say to you, I have a view that you have to bring other stakeholders into the discussion, not purely the political leaders. I think there is space for other stakeholders to be at the table, so that other voices can bring some rationalization and logic to our discussion, that we work in the interest of the people.
Dr. Charles, you know, there is this history in Guyana of this ethnic cleavage, you know, that, and when the PNC is in office, the Guyanese of Indian descent seems to be disenfranchised. When the PVPC is in office, the people of African descent seems to be disenfranchised. If you were to become the leader of the PNCR and ultimately become the president of Guyana, tell us clearly, what is your vision for a Guyana where, irrespective of your ethnic group or your religious background or whatever you are, how inclusive? And I ask this question because, Dr. Charles, every politician's answer it in a nice way. It's words, we speak all the glowing words. And when we're in practice, we throw that through the window. And I'm saying this because we met Mr. Granger when he was running for president in New York. And the way he spoke gave us hope that he will bring Guyana together. In my view, he did exactly the opposite. I might be wrong, but I think he did exactly the opposite. So politicians seem to be telling us the right things, but they do exactly the opposite. How genuine are you, Dr. Charles, that if you become the leader, that you will be this genuine person for Guyana?
Well, let me say to you that race has plagued us over the years. And it is one of the variables that, a preeminent variable that has to be resolved. And let me say, when we look at race, we are linking race, power, and economics. Those are the three areas. We have a motto that speaks to the issue of one people, one nation, one destiny, but those are words. And so one has to understand how one creates the pathway to the one people. Now, one of the first things I believe has to be done is all of the data collection systems in Guyana, linked to power and linked to economics, etc., has to be collected based on ethnicity. In that way, it allows us to identify inequities in all of the ethnic groupings. And it allows us, wherever government, whichever parliament, to be able to look at these inequities, especially as it relates to race. And you begin to develop your programs to deal with it. Let me give you some examples. You look at education, and you see the performance. And what takes the front and center page are the results of children from the Queen's College, St. Stanislaus, St. Rose's, etc. But we have a whole range of other schools in different villages that are ethnically homogeneous. But we don't do any form of analysis in terms of looking at the performance of those schools in those communities. And we look at the combination of subjects that those children write. So you find in some areas, some school children, when writing CXC from certain schools, do not write any science subjects. They purely write art subjects. So you begin to stratify the country ethnically based on professions, based on jobs. So you have to begin to look at the issue. The other issue is the Ethnic Relations Commission has to be revamped totally. And it has to have more clout in examining issues of racial discrimination. I would even say to you that businesses, private businesses, and the public sector has to be encouraged that it presents the ethnic mosaic of the country. And as far as possible, ensure that those things are done. But if you look presently today, and you look at billionaires, you see, and I'm not blaming the present administration for this at all, but you see, you don't see any indigenous millionaires. You don't see any millionaires that are, many millionaires that are from an Afro side. So one has to call to mind, well, what is going on in our society and where is the ethnic balance in terms of access to resources? So I think if we begin to focus on collecting data on all aspects of life in the country based on ethnicity and identify the issues of inequalities, inequities. Let's look at the prisons. It has to be a concern that the majority of people in the prisons are of a certain ethnic group. Has to be. When I look around at the security forces in the country, and what is disturbing to me at least, first of all, the predominance of women in the security system. It tells me it's impacting negatively on family life. And then I look at their ethnicity. It is a cause of concern. And I'm not blaming anybody, but I believe as a society, these are issues, if we don't address it and look and understand these issues. The other thing is that we have to do that I think is important. In terms of the two principal ethnic groupings, there are insecurities, real or imagined. And we haven't been able to discuss and place these insecurities on the front burner to see whether they are real or whether they are imagined. But we have to have that discourse. But it's not a point discourse. It's a long discourse. But for us to come to a resolution on the issue of race. And I believe also the issue of race should be injected into the curriculum of schools, but we've got to have people who understand the importance of the one people, one nation as you discuss race in the school system, in the curriculum. That has to happen, because if not, we continue to live in our ethnic enclaves and we don't know each other. And then we continue this problem to eternity.
Yeah, I got
it. Is solvable.
I got the gist of what you're saying, Doc. I got a question before Dr. Rose come on from one of our viewers, and I want to go back to the election. He said, "Can you ask Dr. Charles, do you believe that had it not been for the discrepancies that was cited in the election, that APNU would have won the election?" That's one. Secondly, do you think the statutory documents missing from certain boxes was significant enough to alter the election results? Two separate questions.
Well, for me, there is a principle, and as I said, let me say for me what the principle is. Once the law clearly states and it spells out that these statutory documents, it lists the documents that should be in the boxes, there must be a reason why these documents were listed in the law. And therefore,
Doc, we understand that. What he's saying, had it not been for those discrepancies, do you think APNU would have won the election? Is it significant enough to give APNU the election for those discrepancies?
if those discrepancies were removed?
Yeah. But APNU would have won the election?
Well, I haven't got the numbers right in front of me. And so I am not going to jump out and say exactly where the numbers are. It's very close because in the present circumstance, the situation between the two, the opposition and the PPP, is about 15,000 votes. So if you had a discounting, most likely APNU, but with a very, very narrow margin.
Okay, Dr. Rose?
Dr. Charles, just one correction. The opposition and the PPP is about 8,000 votes.
Well, at one point in time, it was...
Between APNU and the PPP is 15,000 votes. But when you take the 8,000 votes from the opposition, it's about 8,000 votes in. But Dr. Charles, I am weary. I'm tired. I'm confused. And tonight, I'm going to make sure that this is put to rest once and for all. From my understanding, GCOM had 5 people in every polling station across the country, according to Mr. Lowenfield. 3 polling clerks, a polling agent, and a returning officer. And at least there were 4 agents from the 11 political parties present in the remotest areas of the country. PP was always there, PNC or APNU was always there. You have one from ANOC, one from, and so forth. Now, if you're telling me that John Jones is dead, and people want you all to hear this, and I go to vote for John Jones, what ID will I produce to those polling agents? John Jones' ID or my ID?
No, but you have to understand, when we discovered, I will tell you what I discovered in Lethem. You had fake birth certificates. You have fake IDs. That is the problem.
No. I'm asking you a question.
Hold a second.
If I go to vote for John Jones.
Hold a second. Those are the instruments of identification. And I'm saying to you, I know that we discovered fake birth certificates and fake ID cards. Right?
Okay, fine. But if I go to vote for John Jones, fake certificate, fake whatever it is, whose ID will I produce? Mine, Asquith Rose, or John Jones' ID? When I present my ID to the polling agents there.
Because what you have, I'm telling you, the system on the books is an academic system, and these systems are corrupted. And I'm saying to you, you have to look at it.
Dr. Van Charles,
let me finish, please. Let me finish. Some of the operatives who worked for GCOM showed their partiality in terms of how the flags they were flying, etc. So what the selection and identification of the operatives of GCOM is something that has got to be looked at. That if you are for any political party, one way or the other, and you're openly displaying your connectedness, those people have no place in terms of managing the electoral process. And maybe we may have to come to the point of electronic voting, which has its problems also. But the human part of this thing is one which corrupts.
Dr. Charles, I just mentioned to you, at any one time, in the remotest area of the country, you had 5 people from GCOM personnel, and 4 at a minimum from any one of the 11 political parties. 9 people. If I go to vote for John Jones, who is dead, I'm asking you again, whose ID will I present to these people in order to vote? John Jones' ID or my ID? That's all I want to know.
Let me tell you how the system works. You arrive with an ID. Once there is collusion of the human beings that work in the system, you vote.
No.
Because
you'll have the opposition parties there, the political parties there.
Give me a chance to finish. Once there is collusion, so you arrive with an ID, and the name on the list is John Jones. So the one person receiving says John Jones, and the others look on the list, and they cross off that John Jones is voting. They are not looking. They're not looking at the folios. They're not looking at the card and to identify, because there is collusion. And I'm saying that.
So you're saying that the people do not look at your IDs when you go to vote?
No.
So I cannot vote for 10 different people.
This is not now, Asquith. This has occurred in the election before 15 in 2011 in industry. So it is not a figment of one's imagination. And I'm saying to you, it is a collusion on the part of the operatives in the system, which you have to understand and get away from the point of the academic point of what is on the books. The practice is corrupted.
Dr. Van West Charles, I know you, but I'll tell you this flat out. I don't believe those gymnastics about dead people voting and people overseas voting. I'm not buying into that because no one can explain to me basically how that is working. Everybody tells me collusion, they go with these generalities and all this nonsense. I am not buying that. If I'm John Jones and I go to vote for John Jones, I vote for John Jones. I cannot go and vote again for myself.
No,
so
Asquith.
I'm not. I'm going to move on. I'm not buying it. People who want to believe in that nonsense, they can believe in it, but they're in total denial. I'm not buying into that because no one can explain to me how a dead person can vote. Will I have the dead person ID or my ID? So if I show the dead person ID, this means I cannot vote for myself again. So I don't know. I just want to move on. I understand what you're saying, but I just want to move on. Let me ask you a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
When Abdu came to office, they called local government election in 2016, a year after. They lose the election massively by more than a 2-to-1 margin. Then again, it went back in 2018 and called a second local government election. They even took a shellacking in that election. Do you really expect them to win an election after those massive defeats in local government election?
But Asquith, let us analyze the turnout at local government elections. The turnout is a very small. The participation in local government elections is very, very low. So you cannot use the participation of local government elections and extrapolate to national elections where the participation is much more. You're a researcher. You know that is a wrong extrapolation.
No, I'll say this to you. 36% of turnout voting in local government elections. And if you lose both, there's a trend. It's trending towards something. No.
There is a problem. There is a problem in terms of the organization at the local level. And I believe, honestly, that is something that has to be done in terms of building a participatory democracy. You cannot make that extrapolation, though, from such a low turnout and it's not good for us, because I believe a higher participation in the local democratic elections will help in strengthening our democracy, and it will help, as Charles asked the question about race, because when the races live in a geographical space and they participate in that election, they are concerned about what happens with life within that space. And they will have more discussion, but the participation needs to be more. And how we organize it and how we fund the development at that level. If we were to shift some of the resources from the central ministries and move them and build capacity at the local level that is directed towards development, I think you will have a different level of participation, a different communication at the local level, and it will drive development even more. But because our system is so centralized in terms of the resources of the ministries and not moving down to the NDC and the RDCs, then we have a problem.
Dr. Charles, I will say this. When I say there's a trend, the local government elections showed that APNU won in 4 of the 10 regions and the PB won in the 6 of the 10 regions. And the local government and the general election showed the same thing. So that's a trend. Okay, let me just ask.
No. Don't let me let you off on that hook, because when you say APNU won some of the tongues also, and look at the population representation in those tongues compared to the NDCs, and so we have to because remember, this is at the local level, it's constituency based, whereas at the national level it's a PR system. So you need to analyze the elements very carefully, Asquith.
No, but I did, and I'll stick to my conclusion, but you can have yours. That's okay with me. Now, let me ask you a question here. Mm-hmm. If you were to win the leadership of the PNCR, you become the person who controls the list to appoint parliamentarians. Would you leave the same parliamentarians in Parliament, or you recall some and appoint new ones?
Well, the head of the list doesn't make me the person who appoints everybody. I think there's a process by which those people should be arrived at, and with better consultation. Now, at this point in time, what you want to do is to bolster the performance of the parliamentarians presently in Parliament, and that comes down at a political level, how the party is organized, with sectoral specialist committees, with people who have more experience again, to be able to assist in the analysis and the direction, the strategic direction of the different sectors that the parliamentarians represent in the Parliament.
Dr. Charles, the PNC was 64 years old, I think, a few days ago, on the 6th of this month. Founded in 1957. Mm-hmm. How long have you been a member of the PNC, or PNCR, what do they call it now?
About 4 to 5 years.
4 or 5 years. During that 4 to 5 years' time, and going back to the extra 20 years' time, have you ever heard the chairperson of the party was left out of being a member of Parliament in the history of the party?
Well, this is an aberration at this point in time. All right? This is an aberration at this point in time, and that's why I am running to ensure that we really have a more participatory approach, a more logical approach to what we should do and have been doing over the last 64 years.
Have you ever heard in the 64 years history of the party that the leader says, I'm going on indefinite leave of absence?
Well, the previous leaders have never gone. But I would say that politically, my father-in-law, for example, never took leave. And you look at in the PPP, President Jagan never took leave. But you remember that the present leader had his own difficulties and from a health perspective, and therefore that may have come to the fore. I can't say yay or nay, but what I do know is that Commonwealth Lawrence is at the helm, and she is directing the ship now, and I'm sure you have begun to see a difference.
Okay, one question before my colleague comes in, and this is a question that will play into your politics. Your platform as a party, as a candidate for the PNCR party, what would you advocate? Would you maintain the coalition, which, and I'm going to say it here now, only the PNCR and the AFC with a small semblance of the vote are actually parties. The rest are one-man party, which is a sham. Keith Scott, WPA, don't even exist. The Amerindian Party, Ali Cock Party, Sharma Party. Was that really a coalition or a sham for a coalition? The coalition should be in PNCR and AFC. Do you agree?
Well, when the coalition, let's say the partnership first, the discussion started around the partnership. The PNCR had many deliberations in terms of its meaning. And whilst we have to understand that whilst numbers are the critical issue with respect to winning elections, there are other variables, the psychological variables, etc. I think the decision by the PNCR to work with the partnership in terms of showing that it has the capability and that willingness to bring other people in. And that is for this reason I'm saying to you that I am of the view that even the parliament in its present structure, my own personal view on this matter is that other actors, other agencies, other stakeholders in the society should be able to find a place, I think, in the parliament of the country, so that we can look at the governing of the country. I mean, if we stick to the Westminster model, then you are only going to go with the political dominance in the parliament. But we have to think for ourselves, and we have to think what is best for us, because we are a multi-ethnic. We haven't got, Britain tries to do many things with peerages and the lords and so forth, to deal with some of the other stakeholders in terms of the representation in their system. But we haven't got that. What we have is the dominance at the political level. I think we need to find the opportunity to discuss the participation of other stakeholders in the society, in our parliament, and to look at it as we go forward. We had other opportunities. If we look at the Constitution, we had the Supreme Congress of the People and other areas. So we have to look and see how we can involve other sectors. We're a very religious country, and although we say our state is a secular state, saying the state is a secular state, but by not having the participation of the religious voice is important in how we run the affairs of the country. Labour, for example, is critical to my mind in terms of their voice being at the table. Their voice needs to be at the table. They need to be heard as we plan to develop this country and move forward. It becomes very, very important.
Dr. Charles, one last question before my colleague jump in here, Charles. Since the formation of the PEP contesting elections in the 50s or in the 60s, it was Chedi Jagan and Brindley Ben as premier and deputy premier. And then after 1992, it was Chedi Jagan, Sam Hines, Chedi Jagan as president, Sam Hines as prime ministerial candidate. My question to you is this: who President Burnham had as his prime ministerial candidate in 1980?
It was Ptolemy Reed.
Who Robert Corbyn had as his prime ministerial candidate in 2006? Or who Desmond Hoyt had as his prime ministerial candidate in 2001 or in 92 and onwards?
Well, that was Hammy Green. And
okay. And who Corbyn had, Robert Corbyn?
Well, he wasn't president.
No, when he was running in 2006 as a presidential candidate.
Let me see, I can't even remember right now.
Okay, okay.
But
my question to you is this. Why all of a sudden the PNCR or the coalition has to follow in the PB footstep? You have a party leader or the presidential candidate, an Indian, because the PP wants to represent Indians, and you put a black person there to camouflage the people that we are united. And the PNCR under David Granger follow the same thing in appointing Nagamutu there. Why you have to follow the PEP? If you are confident, you appoint the people that you think will mold the party and carry it through. Because putting an Indian leader there, you're not going to get no cross votes. It's the same 4, 5, 6% of the votes that will, blacks will vote 4 or 5% for the PEP. Indians will vote 4 or 5% for the PNC. And I'm saying to you now, and to all our listeners, in Guyana and in the Caribbean, the people do not vote for a leader, they vote for a party. So take my friend Donkey, which he called champion, you put it to the head of the PEP, they'll get the same votes. Take my friend Mule, which he called Omega, put it at the PNC, they will get the same vote. So why all this maneuvering nonsense about leadership? You must have an Indian and a black. What are they camouflaging?
Because it's not camouflage. Those are symptoms of our inability to deal with race in the country.
Agree. Okay, I agree with you on that point. You answered the question.
Right? And so it is not now only race, but we have to ensure that gender becomes part of the process. So, I mean, we have to take a different tack to what we're doing. And this, I agree with you, this is a kind of window dressing that is
exactly, it's window dressing.
Right? And it is, the heart of it is the race issue. And we think that we have comfort one way or the other, that we have an Afro Guyanese at the top and an Indo-Guyanese at the number 2, or an Indo-Guyanese at the top and an Afro. That type of window dressing, I agree with you totally. It cannot lead us. We need to, that's why Charles's question on race is so critical, because we have to deal with the race issue for us to move forward in a sustainable manner, or else we are going to be in all of the window dressing. And there is no reason. Well, we had when we started off, the first president of the country, Arthur Chung, and then the constitution changed. But there must be no reason why we decide to pick people because of their ethnicity. We must be able to decide on a person because of his or her capacity to perform their duties, either as president, prime minister, minister, etc. And I totally agree with you, Asquith.
Amen. So my champion, my donkey champion will head one party next election, and the mule Omega will head another party. People listen to me, vote for Omega and champion. Thank you. Charles, over to you.
Dr. Charles, before we close tonight and time is running out, I want to go back to your last full-time job, if you don't mind. You were the CEO of Gaiwa, GW.
I left there as the managing director.
The managing director. Couple things. One, there was report in the papers that all the executive vice president are male. Was that of your doing, or when you were there, it was different?
No, I mean, I met those people in position, and one of the things I started to do was to try also to put female managers in place.
But I'm talking about executive vice president.
No, there are no executive vice presidents. There are executive directors.
Okay.
Right? They're executive directors. They were all in place when we took over.
No,
they held substantive positions.
And you made them executive director, executive.
Let me tell you what the problem is, Charles. The problem is that the program at the University of Guyana, the intake of the engineers and the crop that comes to GWI are basically, the majority are males. And this is one of the things that I've been speaking about when I was at GWI, that the intake, we have to try to go out and support in terms of attracting more females to the engineering faculty and also to GWI.
Okay.
That is basically
okay. That was a problem. The second thing, Dr. Charles, was that there is report that when you went there as the managing director, you there were 600 employees. When you left, you doubled the number of employees and bankrupt the organization. Is there any truth to that?
Well, the organization is not bankrupt, but you have a system where quality was not a preeminent focus in the company. So you had a fledgling laboratory that did 1,200 tests per annum. When I left, we took it to 66,000 tests and testing water across the country. In Georgetown, which takes the majority of water from the surface water, not groundwater. That water was not tested with any regularity. I placed a lab in Shelter Belt and tested the water hourly before it goes out. Now, you can't be thinking of a capital city, first of all, and all of the residents, as a matter of fact, across the country, should have access to quality water. And that is why you would have seen that exponential increase in the number of tests done. And we had to submit that to the Public Utilities Commission. And therefore, that made a change in terms of the quality of water. Now, you can't run a system providing water on a few hours, 10 hours here, 8 hours here, 12 hours there, 14 hours there. WHO speaks to, I'm a physician, so water quality becomes very, very critical to me. It may not be important to Mr. Batch, but I strove to ensure that we have 24/7 of good quality water that we were moving to, and I wanted to get to the point across the country where people can turn their taps and drink. And so we were looking at the infrastructure, looking at different mechanisms to ensure that what comes out, that the chlorine residual and other things, and we were even seeking to reduce the amount of chlorine and other chemicals in the system. So if you were to look at the American Water Association and you look at the average number of workers per population, GWI is not above that, but you have to consider that if you consider Region 9, for example, in the hinterland, with some 57 villages scattered across a large expanse of land, and you have schools and you have residents, they are entitled to the same quality of water and systems that we are entitled on the coast. So when we put things in place for workers to manage the system, to ensure that leaks are addressed very quickly, because you don't want bacteria to get in the system, obviously, you will, and it comes down, you say you're one people, one nation, one destiny. Well, the same quality of education, access to water, access to healthcare, all of those things speaks to the one people, the one nation, the one destiny. So I don't know what is the hullabaloo about, but you have, if you intend, and we, let me say to you that the system of collection, if they intensify it, the money will be there. if they changed the metering system to the way in which we were going, the money would be there and people will pay. But because people pay for quality.
All right.
Part of this world.
Dr. Charles, we are getting, we are really running out of time now. But the last question before we wrap up tonight. When you left GWI, how much funds they had available in the coffers to pay and what debt they had when you left? What was the amount of debt?
In the accounts, there were about 600 and something million. And we were reducing. Yes, let me say to you what happened. Government normally doesn't pay all its money for the supply to government premises immediately.
Right.
And we had a discussion with the Ministry of Finance that owed us the exact amount, not the exact amount, more than what we owed suppliers and contractors. And those figures are there for everyone to see.
So you had a huge receivables.
Yes. So it's not that we didn't have the cash to pay. It's that we were waiting on government to pay us. And the other issue which they are trying to make out is that never before GWI was called to pay its electricity bill. It's an essential service, but yet we have to pay the taxes. We don't access electricity free of duty, but it's an essential commodity to provide people, and the rates that if people had to pay the real rates of operation, it would be astronomical because of all the taxes and duties that we have to pay.
Okay, Dr. Charles, there's so many outstanding questions, but in your opinion, well, not in your opinion only, but you are the CEO of the organization. You did not leave it bankrupt, as you said. It was not bankrupt.
No, not at all.
There was hundreds of millions in receivables that was owed from the government that the government did not pay.
Over 1.something billion dollars.
And that was the coalition government, or that preceded the coalition government?
That was the Ministry of Finance and the coalition.
The coalition, okay.
And we had worked out with the Ministry of Finance how we were going to get it. But remember that time in the last year, COVID started, and therefore some of the workers even gave up their allowances because we had to keep the system going, because water was such an important commodity to COVID.
Right. Dr. Charles, we'll have to bring it an end there. It was a pleasure having you in our program tonight. We want to wish you all the best in your campaign for the leadership of the party. And should you become that leader, we will definitely want to invite you back on the program to let you have your say in what your vision is for the new PNC. Do you want to say anything in closing?
Well, Charles and Asquith, let me thank you for having me. I believe this type of discussion is critical to our development as a country, and that we can exchange our views and be able to share more information so that our people are more informed, because the more our people are informed on a number of issues, the better they are able to make decisions. So I believe that such programs such as this, very, very important and very critical. And I want to thank you for having me this evening, and thank you for your viewers for listening. And don't be afraid to try to touch base to have any further clarifications that you may have, which I can give.
Thank you. We will. Dr. Rose?
Yes, I want to say, first of all, that I think I made light of a situation there when I said party politics. But it's true that all the literature in the Caribbean point towards party politics. The people in the Caribbean vote for the party, not leaders per se. That's one thing I want to say. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask all Guyanese to do is to ask the government and those in charge to make sure that the civil service changes policies. Civil servants, when employed, if a civil servant is employed in September, that person will get paid until January of next year. 3 months will go past, the person will not get a paycheck. But the other person has to travel to work every day. and eat as well and utilize clothing. So I'm asking every one of you to let the government know that civil servants should be paid at least 30 days after being employed.
Let me say this, Asquith, I think I want to say that is wrong. But the other thing with the civil service is that all vacancies in the civil service needs to be properly advertised where people can know and make applications. The vacancies that are available are in many ways linked to different influences, I should say. And therefore, I think that we need to ensure that all of the vacancies are available, advertised, so that people can apply, and if they fit, they have the interviews and they can access.
Two, I want to make the point that it is time for the government to make sure that all government offices, state corporations, and agencies are opened during lunchtime and not be closed. Rotate your staff so as to make sure that all offices are open. And three, everyone in Guyana knows that the internet system sucks. You excuse the language. You're in the midst of a conversation and it breaks down on you. If this country cannot have a proper internet system, then how are we going to develop this country? Well, communication is a groundwork for development. And if your communication system is failing you, then you cannot have proper development. So I'm asking all of you, and I'm asking the government to look at those who are in charge of providing internet services to make sure that they give the people the best for their money. GT&T is at the top of it, and I'll call it out. It's at the culprit of all of this. So I'm asking the executives of GT&T to provide better services to the people of Guyana. And lastly, I'm asking all our listeners to help us continue this program. We're asking for your donation, no matter how small it is. To produce this program is very costly. So I'm asking if you can make a contribution. Go to the website and it'll lead you straight, or you can make a donation. You can use your credit card, you can use Zelle, you can use whatever you have at your disposal. Please make a donation to help us continue this program. Thank you all, and have a pleasant Wednesday evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rose. Thank you, Dr. Charles, and to all our viewers out there, to Devin and to all our viewers, a very good night. And we see you back here on Monday when we'll have another interesting discussion on Guyana. Take care, all the best.